Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Welcome to this second week in November. We are focusing in November and December on preparation for the holiday season. We know that this is a busy time of year, elections, end of the year kind of evaluations, grieving, just trying to make sense of balance as we're going into preparation for a new year. And so this month I am going to be talking about how to take care of ourselves during the busyness of the season and all of the different things that we're navigating. And today I want to honor our veterans. Veterans Day was November 11th. Some of you might have celebrated it on the 10th. And so today I'm going to be discussing veterans, and particularly I'm going to be discussing the holidays and homelessness. So let's get into it. We understand that everybody experiences holidays different, and our active duty, our veterans and their families, actually probably face a unique set of needs because of different things like active duty. Soldiers may be deployed. They could be deployed with their families. They might be deployed without their families. Perhaps they might be at duty stations where they're unable to get home to family during the holidays, or maybe there are some dynamics that they're just not able to get home. Maybe home is far away, it's expensive, and so it just can maybe a challenge to be able to connect with families. And then there's also our veterans who may not have access to family, and also those who may be homeless. And so a lot of people have, I think, mixed emotions around homelessness and veterans. I think a lot of times we blame people for homelessness, and we don't recognize that homelessness is a component of a lot of different factors, and it's a manifestation of someone being lazy or unmotivated, and not taking advantage of resources. One of the things that I think is important for us to do is sometimes just walk a mile in someone else's shoes to really get an understanding of all of the different dynamics that people experience that could lead to homelessness. What are those things? Financial instability, mental illness, substance abuse, and at the top of those are traumatic brain injuries, post traumatic stress disorder, opioid use, and sexual trauma. So these things can contribute to homelessness, and they contribute to homelessness for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes people do go to treatment. They go to treatment and they're not given what they need. Sometimes they're given, and as we get into this, opioid epidemic became a thing because we were treating a lot of chronic pain issues that our active duty as well as our veterans have with opioids. And so then we got to a point where we're like, oh, okay, well, that's probably not a good idea. So then we came and we said, okay, yeah, we can't prescribe all of this to you. But by this time, people were already addicted. And we didn't have anything to put in its place that allowed people to be able to manage their pain any differently. Because there are some times when treatments such as injections or physical therapy, or other types of medication management aren't successfully treating the issue because we're not really addressing what is causing the pain. And so as people are having challenges trying to live and exist and have a healthy life, sometimes they're trying to access treatments and they end up losing their insurance benefits. Sometimes they're trying to access treatments and the treatments aren't being helpful. Sometimes people get kicked out of treatments because they're trying other things to manage their pain. Because what opioids can really do for a person is it can cause you to be numb and zombie-like. That's one of the biggest complaints that I get from people is like, I'm tired all the time. So I'm taking these things. It's not that they necessarily address my pain as much as they just allow my body to be so groggy and tired that I'm sleeping through the pain. But when I wake up, the pain is there with me as well. And so imagine being addicted to a substance or trying to use substances to just get some type of relief, some numbness from dealing with some of these other issues, um, traumatic stress disorder, sexual trauma, and trying to be able to get some peace from that, then I'm looking at whatever I can to be able to manage traumatic brain injuries. And so I find that a lot of times what we don't recognize about what happens when people get a TBI is that their cognitive functioning very much changes. And so often we have people who cannot work after they've been diagnosed with a TBI. They've gone through rehabilitative services, and they're as good as they're going to be able to get. They're having memory problems. Some of them could be having speech problems, comprehension issues. The cognitive capacity is changed in such a way that a person can become very impulsive. They can have more episodes of mood disorders, irritability, anger, rage. And so then this person is no longer employable. And then there are also people who have attempted to try to get benefits and resources and have not been able to do so. Their claims have been denied. Their resources have been taken away. And so oftentimes I tell people, like, any of us truthfully could be a step away from homelessness. We're given just the right factors. Some of us are a paycheck away from homelessness. Some of us are less than a paycheck away from homelessness. And some of us are about 3 months of saving away from homelessness. But if you have a severe enough type of thing to happen in your life that causes you not to be able to have enough resources over a long enough period of time, then any of us can be faced with a situation where we have to make some significant adjustments in our lives, and one of them may be giving up the residence in which we live. But we also know that there are some challenges returning to civilian life after serving in the military. And oftentimes, because there's so much trauma and there's so much loss, support systems may not be adequate. People may have lost their resources. They may have had, and given all of the things that we just talked about that could potentially be challenges, may have lost relationships with people due to that, or combat related losses. And so I've lost the people that became my support system while I was in the military. Or you lose touch with people, you move around and you don't have those connections. And so that isolation can get to a point where a person just doesn't have adequate access to people that love and care about them. Now, we don't know exactly how many vets are homeless because there isn't necessarily a good way to track that. So 2023, the VA did set a goal of providing housing for 38,000 vets. And that's just the goal that they set for providing housing. So I think it's important for us to note that about 1/5 of vets face some type of food insecurity, not being able to have adequate resources in terms of being able to get meals. And so it could be upwards of 1.4 million veterans that may be seeking support or assistance for various reasons, whether it's housing or food, trying to get benefits, medical, financial, or legal resources out there. And so people will say, well, why don't they just go get help? They're veterans. They ought to be able to go through the VA. They ought to have access to things. That's not always true. Sometimes people run into dead ends when they're trying to get help. I have had quite a large number of people tell me that they get so frustrated and so helpless and so hopeless around trying to get support services. They're calling places, oh, I can't see you. I can't see you regularly. That's the other thing. I may be able to see you, but I may be only able to see you once every 3 months. You may be in a position where you need treatment more regular than that. Or I get to a place and you all don't accept this insurance. Or I get to a place and you don't see me for this issue. There might even be a wait list. Or you're no longer accepting the type of resources the VA offers. There are a lot of places that have stopped taking certain types of insurance because they aren't necessarily getting paid in a timely manner. Or they're having issues with people not showing up, just a variety of different things that providers have experienced. So there are certain populations of people that are impacted heavily by the type of insurance benefits that they have. Sometimes people don't know where to get help. And so we think, oh, well, we're in a technology age. People ought to be able to access all of these resources. Not necessarily. And don't assume everybody is savvy enough to be able to get online and know how to access these resources. Sometimes people do go and they feel dismissed. They don't feel heard. They feel like they are just being managed and not actually being treated. They may feel like the providers are just there for a season, because sometimes when you're dealing with the VA or you're utilizing resources on a post or base, some type of military installation, you have those medical providers and those mental health providers are also being moved to different stations. And so I may have had several providers in the course of a year. So that doesn't feel good, having to come in and retell my story. I don't feel like my care is consistent and I'm not getting exactly what I need. That leads to more incidences of being misdiagnosed. Sometimes I definitely think that there is a message to our active duty soldiers and to our veterans, like, don't whine, suck it up. You ought to be able to handle this. Like, it's not as big of an issue, deal with it. And so sometimes there is that stigma of, I don't want to go ask for help because it feels like I'm less than a person if I go ask for help. Feel like people are being demeaning to me, telling me that I ought to be able to manage this. But also it may be that I'm going, and because you don't see me, and when I say see me, you're not really understanding, you're not really hearing me, then you are not even able to really address the issues that I have. Sometimes we don't want this to negatively impact our service ability and capacity, or our ability to be able to parent, right? So there are some negative impacts. We know this to be true in terms of employment, being able to have custody of children, being able to get access to managing your own finances, being able to get access to certain types of jobs, right? Those things can be impacted. And so sometimes we'll have people that end up not necessarily wanting to share everything that's going on with them, that ultimately leads to them having issues in the places where they were trying not to, right? So I end up losing the kids anyway. I end up losing the job anyway. I end up losing the house anyway, because I was afraid that if people knew what I was dealing with, they would not want me to be able to have these things. We do know that there are a lot of resources that are understaffed and underfunded. When it comes to mental health, that tops the list for me, that there is so much greater need than I think a lot of times are available, particularly for our veterans. Our active duty soldiers may have some additional options on post or base, but again, they may not necessarily be able to be seen in the timely manner that they want, or the amount of times that they need, or again, there's that stigma, and so they don't want to be labeled, and end up having some negative consequences as a result of addressing what they need. Sometimes we're in places where people just don't have accessibility, right? That whether that is the ability to get there, transportation wise, the ability to be able to access video resources, the ability to be able to even understand when you're talking to them about a video appointment, telehealth, what that means, how to connect with people, what happens if a person doesn't show up. I'm sitting and I'm waiting. I might be expecting someone to call me, but they may be sitting in a virtual room somewhere waiting for me to check in. I think that there is definitely still a mental health stigma that's out there regarding people being able to access mental health services, particularly. And then also depends on how severe our symptoms are, because sometimes we just don't feel like we can be helped, and that it doesn't matter what we do. There's not going to be any kind of significant changes, particularly if there is some severe chronic issues that I'm dealing with, and maybe I've had a variety of different treatments and they haven't been successful. But also just kind of the delays in getting here care. Like, I think that sometimes, again, people are trying to access things, but when you go in through all of this red tape and trying to get connected, and you get people on the phone, you get disconnected. I might be over there, I have to wait. Maybe you all are sending me my medication in the mail and you're not doing it regularly, and every other month I'm having an issue with receiving it, or you're sending me old meds. The meds have been updated and they haven't been updated by you, so you're sending me stuff that I'm not even supposed to take. So I got a drawer full of stuff that I'm not even taking anymore, or that I have to go physically to a facility and I'm waiting for long periods of time there, even to try to get an appointment, and there's not necessarily a system for me to get an appointment other than calling in to see if there are appointments available. Like, you can't schedule me out. So there's a lot of different barriers to people getting help, that not getting help, the not getting the resources, the not being able to get access, whether again that's legal care, mental health care, medical care, financial resources, housing resources. We all know that there is definitely a crisis of housing. And so being able to get into affordable housing, being able to get on wait lists, people have been on wait lists for housing for years, some of them. And so being able to access those resources, I don't have the money to get an attorney, trying to find agencies that have legal aid for me, who's going to take my case to make sure that I get my benefits. Would I even know where to reach out to a person to see what kind of resources are out there? So again, all of these things make it very easy for someone to end up in a place where they're homeless, right? And I truthfully do believe that sometimes we just give up. Like we literally are like, I just can't. I don't, the energy and reserve I have, I need to just use it to try to get up every day. I cannot be dealing with all of these other things. It just feels too much to even be able to navigate. So I say that all to say, it is very important that we support our veterans, we support our active duty military, we support their families. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. I'm just going to highlight some of the things, but also I'm going to highlight a resource that's got a lot of information about different options that we can utilize to support our veterans. One, all of us has something that we're gifted at. And so whatever that is, I encourage you to figure out how you can use that gift. You may be the person that gives people access. You may know some people, you may have some you may have the ability to Google and find information. You may have an ongoing list of resources. You may have been in a situation where you needed to do some research and find some information, and so you have it. Share it. Share that legal information, that mental health information, that medical information, that financial information, the housing information, that spiritual resource, places where people can get support. Share it. Most of us have the capacity to be able to do that, to just share information. And I encourage any of you that are listening to become a person that shares resources, right? Because the more we know, the more that we're able to address some of these issues before they get to a point where we may be able to prevent someone from getting to a state of homelessness, getting to a point of being suicidal, getting to a point of being isolated, simply because we share resources, right? Two is being able to instill hope. Like sometimes people just need an encouraging word. It is not great right now, right? Like I am not going to sugarcoat it. Your situation is not a great situation right now, but I don't necessarily think this is the best that it could be. So let's do everything we can to get some kind of change in it, right? That encouraging word, being present, listening, empathizing with, being able to encourage can go a long way with somebody. And you don't necessarily have to be concerned about what that looks like. Just do some things, because sometimes we spend so much time trying to, well, maybe they wouldn't find that helpful, or right, and then we don't do anything. But I guarantee you that most times you're doing something is going to be met with a positive. Or at the very least, say like, hey, I don't necessarily need that, but I could use this, right? And so you open up some doors by just having conversations. We also want to normalize help seeking, recognize that it's a strength, not a weakness. And it is also a problem solving strategy. When we're trying to balance all of the different things we have going on in life, we need to have a variety of tools to be able to use. One of them is to get support, to get help, to get resources, right? Because that allows us to be able to not have to carry the load on our own and it not be so heavy. And anything that we do in life, truthfully, that is sustainable is usually because we're doing it with other people. Because we know many hands make light work, right? So in that military service, there was a team, your battle buddies, the people in your battalion, the people that were in your barracks, right? You became a support system, you became a family. The same is true for when you are going through things. You need that support, you need that family. And so there's a lot of different people that can be added into the family, but we want to normalize for people that it doesn't have to just stay in this group. Like once this group is no longer available, that I don't have anything. Sometimes we need to expand our definition of who we consider to be our family, our tribe, our people, right? And anytime we can increase access, whether that's you providing or arranging transportation, being able to help somebody with their video access, being able to help people navigate email addresses, set up appointments, um, going to appointments with them, taking notes. Like sometimes it is so much information. You've been at a provider's office before and you're like, oh, what did they say? I forgot, right? But to have somebody writing that down, to have somebody being able to answer the questions for you that maybe you may be having difficulty with, particularly we think about TBIs, we think about post-traumatic stress disorder, trust, just being able to establish relationships. I might feel more comfortable with you, person gatekeeper, to have you write down the things that need to be addressed. And so as I'm working to rebuild my trust, find my voice, connect with this person, then I have an advocate for me right there in the room. That advocate can go a long way in terms of making sure that people have a voice when they may be having difficulty being able to express theirs for various reasons. We also want to make sure that we are aware of responsive and appropriate care that fits that veteran or active duty person's needs. Because sometimes we think it's a one size fits all, like, oh, we're just going to send you over here. That may not necessarily be the best fit for you. You may not need to be seen on post on base. You may need to be seen in the community. You may not need to be seen in the community. You might need to be seen at the VA. You may not need to be seen at the VA. You may need to be seen in this telehealth appointment by another provider, right? So just making sure that we are appropriately addressing the needs of the person so that we fully understand. And that's that, making sure that we hear them, we see them, we connect with them, because it's not going to be helpful to you to be able to get housing resources if you don't have the ability to be able to maintain a house, right? It's not going to be helpful for you to be able to get all these canned goods when you don't have a can opener. It's not going to be helpful for you to get this food that needs to be refrigerated when you don't have a refrigerator, right? And so being able to ensure that we're addressing adequately what a person needs, and so we do that needs assessment, right, to be able to check in with them and see all of the areas, and working with agencies that will be able to do that. And I'm going to go through some of the agencies and some of the resources here in a bit, because knowledge is power. And so we want to make sure that you're knowledgeable of all of the things that are out there. So let's talk about fraud before we get into this. So I want you to be aware that 'tis the season for scams. And so what people will do is they'll pull on our heartstrings, these fraudulent organizations that throw words out like warriors and heroes and disabled, and this is how you can make a difference. And they'll show these pictures of folks and, hey, you can get a person a service animal, all of these things. And they're not actually really agencies, or there are agencies, but the majority of their funding and resources goes to administrative things. It doesn't actually get into the hands of the people that need it. So one, legit charities aren't going to be throwing words around like warriors and heroes and disabled. Two, anytime an organization or agency, a charitable, they say agency, reaches out to you and they're like, oh, you got to donate immediately, that's a red flag. Or like, oh, hey, thank you so much for a donation you made that you didn't actually make, that's a red flag. Oh, you win a prize. You'll be entered into a sweepstakes if you give. That is actually illegal, so that's a flag. You want to ask, right? Get details about their mission. How many service members they actually do help, how many family members they help, how many veterans do they help, how much is spent on programs as opposed to the administrative things like their facilities, right, to fundraising and overhead. You ought to be able to get a legit address, phone number, and website for this organization. And you ought to be able to go and look at the Better Business Bureau, or some reputable agencies, to be able to see if this place is referenced. You ought to be able to look up reports and ratings. Like all of this stuff ought to be public information. You ought to be able to get a receipt showing how much you've given. You ought to be able to check your credit card statement, and it ought to match the actual agency's name. Don't ever do a wire transfer or a gift card. That's a scammer, because they want to be able to have payment methods that nobody's going to check them against. Want to make sure that you are being very mindful of anything that comes in your mail that looks like it might be a bill, like an invoice, if you will, because those are also some red flags. But Charity Navigator, Charity Watch, GuideStar, and the Better Business Bureau actually has like a kind of wise giving alliance that it has in particular that will allow you to be able to research charities. So any of those resources will be able to let you know whether or not this is a reputable agency, charity resource, right? So we want to check this out because what we want to be is we want to be good stewards of information. We want to be trusted resources. We don't want to be giving out information that's going to put people in situations where they can get scammed and then they're in a financial situation that could lead them to some more detrimental types of things, right? Okay, so if you look at Woods and Woods LLC, they're a firm that serves veterans. They have all of this specific details and information about these organizations, when the deadlines are to get information, how to access them, all of this good stuff. So I am going to direct you there, but I do want to highlight a few things because I know, especially during the holidays, we want to be supportive. So holiday stockings for heroes. And they are just a donation drive that was created by Soldiers Angels. Anybody can participate in that. You just collect items. They have a list of suggested items. You put them into a stocking, you send it off to a designated address, and you will receive a confirmation. And you can also include a card, a letter. I really like that one because the family can participate in that. Soldiers Angels also has an Adopt a Veteran or Veterans Family program for military and veteran families. You can register for that in order to be able to receive those resources. And so again, as we're acting as trusted advocates for people, signing people up for things so they'll be able to receive stuff, particularly if they have an address where they can receive resources. And then also check in if you know that they're living in a homeless shelter, making sure that you're providing information to see what can go to the homeless shelter for the veterans and their families, right? There are a lot of different veteran charities that are on that website. Freedom Service Dogs of America, Folds of Honor, Blue Star Families, Honor Flight Network, Wounded Warrior. I know a lot of people have heard about them. So those are some resources that are on there, and I definitely encourage you to check those out. But also, you don't have to connect with an agency to do a heartfelt card, a homemade letter, invite a veteran or a service family to your house for a meal, invite them to church. Um, I think a lot of times, just even dropping off food and donations, clothing, blankets, practical things, socks, offering to pick up medication, offering to, again, provide that transportation, um, doing things like, hey, I know that your lawn needs cutting. When I cut mine, I'll cut yours, right? And sometimes just doing these things, because a lot of times we see that a person is struggling and we understand that it can be difficult for people to ask for help. Here is someone who has served their country, and to be in a position where they are now needing help can be very difficult. And so sometimes you just need to see something and do something, right? Like, hey, I noticed that their lawn doesn't get manicured in the same way. Let me go and help. I noticed that they got some shutters falling off. Let me go and help. I noticed that their door needs to be tightened up. It's coming off the hinges. Let me go and help. So you don't necessarily have to be with an organization in order for you to be able to do those kind of things. Yes, there are things like Operation Christmas Spirit that supports military families and service members. And they'll have events during the holiday season. There is Angel Tree. There are gift cards, and you can send those in so that they can be distributed. Toy drives, right? You'll see a lot of these things around in your grocery stores. There's a VA volunteer transportation network where you can actually get with a transportation service for the VA to be able to get people to and from authorized facilities. But also, this is a good time to support small veteran-owned businesses. There are a lot that are still struggling since COVID. The pandemic cut into a lot of businesses, and some of them weren't able to really come back, particularly if they don't have a lot of online presence. And so there is a veteran-owned business guide that comes out every year. So that can be something that you can check into to be able to see, like, hey, what are some of the businesses I can support? But I will also tell you that any small thing can uplift someone's spirits. You can invite somebody for coffee because maybe they don't want to do crowds, too many people, a lot. Um, Maybe you want to come to them, you want to bring them a plate and just have a conversation with them. They may not be mobile, they may not be able to get out and do things. There may be, they may have a service animal that you may be able to, like, hey, let me get your animal groomed for you, right? Let me take care of some of those animal droppings in the yard. Let me come in and I'm going to take you out. People are going to come in and do a little spring cleaning for you. Get your laundry clean, get your bedding washed. Maybe you have the need to get some blinds repaired, right? Sometimes people have vision problems, and so they're just needing some assistance, being able to even open their mail. I can go through your mail with you, weekly. So there are a lot of different ways that you can show up and support our veterans, but also our active duty who have families, may have a lot of kids that they may need resources for. They may need to have activities for. They may be new to an area and so they haven't made connections with people. And so you being able to just show up in the ways of invitation. People always have a right to say no, but it is so nice to be invited. So as you're thinking about this holiday season, look around your church, look around your neighborhood, look around your children's school, look around the ball fields. You may see spouses because their partners are deployed who could utilize that extra support. And so that's what I would encourage you to do. This holiday season, pay attention to your veterans, your active duty, and their families who may be silently in need and who would love someone to see them, pay attention, advocate, and support them. 'Tis the season. Be well.